Hi, everyone. Welcome to Psychology and Spirituality, a Bridge to Better Life discussion. I'm here with Dr. Anahy Fonseca. Anahy, it is so good to have you back to the program. Thank you so very much. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great and thrilled to be here with you and everybody else.
Oh, wonderful. Welcome, everyone. And today, the topic of discussion is loss as initiation, which, Anahi, I believe it's quite a difficult topic if you think about it, right? So, the thoughts that came to my mind as we're developing this discussion today, I was thinking that for all of us who are going through or have gone through or will go through grief, right? There is this idea that it is painful, it is difficult, it is challenging, but we just have to just get some grit and survive through it. But what if, and I grief is something that number one, that we're all meant. There is an intentionality of this process that we're all meant to go through it, not as a punishment, but as the platform to which we are able to embrace transformation, right? So I just wanted to maybe for us to talk about and reflect upon those moments in life and if we broaden enough, right? Because we discuss more than grieving the death of a loved one, right? We talked about the loss of many different dimensions, including a relationship that ends, a dream that has collapsed, or even our own sense of identity dissolves for, I don't know, retirement, end of career, whatever that may be. And that moment we feel, and I'm putting myself in the middle, right? We feel that everything that life is supposed to be is at the brink of destruction. It is ending. And as we think about it, we would like to talk about loss as initiation because beneath the surface, something else is happening, something that is quite positive, right? So, before we move on to the conversation, maybe we want to ask you today, Anai, what is happening to us when we go through loss? And maybe we can talk a
Wow.
little bit about Freud and Jung, how they talked about the subject. What are your thoughts?
Okay. So first of all, I would like to invite everybody else that are will be listening to us,
Mhm.
Marcia, and both of us also, because when we say that it's something difficult,
Yes.
then we are going to be talking about the ego, of course. Our, as
Right.
Jung says, the center of our consciousness here in this life, for our psyche, right? Our soul here. So the thing is that when we say that it's something difficult, usually the ego, like shut down. Say,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
that's too difficult. So I won't understand a word about Freud,
Okay, so
Jung, or
rewind. It's easy.
yes,
Yes.
yes. And how we make this easy, especially for us and for everybody else that are listening to this podcast, Marcia, is to remember, to remind actually ourselves that we are talking about an experience.
Mhm,
Loss is an archetypal experience.
mhm,
Archetypal, when we are talking about, of course, Jung concepts of the archetypes, are forms in the depths of our psyche, right? Patterns of behavior, of perception, of acting in this, of reacting and acting in this world that we all have. and that we all share. So when we talk about
Regardless of culture,
loss,
right? Regardless of culture. Yeah. Hmm.
regardless, because
Yeah.
it's in what you call the collective unconscious, or we also say nowadays the transpersonal dimension of the psyche. So it goes beyond the personal, right? So when we talk about loss, we are talking about an archetypal process,
Hmm.
because as you well said, Martha, we when we come to this world, this material world, right, we are going to lose
Yeah.
lots of things. Youth, for example, because oh, we are such cute babies, but then I was talking the other day to some friends, colleagues, and how
Yeah.
come everybody wants to put, for instance, pictures of photos of babies and pets and the internet and all the time.
Yeah.
That's a discussion for another time.
Yeah.
But it's because we all think it's cute, and it makes us so happy to laugh at what they, okay. But this baby, in a very few years, is going to grow, of course, and it's
Hmm.
not going to be as cute anymore
Yeah.
in a sense, because, for instance, when we are teenagers, for instance, we are questioning, and it's a psychological process of growth. We
Yeah.
are questioning authority, for instance, and it's not cute when,
Yeah.
the teenagers are questioning things, and like, kind of, we have to have a lot of patience with some of their behaviors and so on and so forth. So, okay, then we realize that we are going to lose youth. We are going to lose sometimes health, because we are going to get sick. Of course,
Yeah.
we are going through life never
Yeah.
getting sick. This doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
We hopefully not very ill, but we need this experience. The ego and our psyche, the ego needs to adapt. It's the
Hmm.
part of our consciousness here that adapts to the outside world. And of course, it depends also of the ego's perception of the inner world. For instance, if I have pain, is the ego that is having this perception of pain. So we go and see a doctor to
Yeah.
see what's going on with my body, and
Yeah.
etc. So the ego is developing to this life here,
Yeah.
to discriminate, to mature, to know how to act in society, to have relationships, to work, to have autonomy. This is to learn how to, I say, discernment, because it's more mature than to judge. And
Yes.
then,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
because we shouldn't judge others, because we are all very complex as beings. Our psyche is very complex, and the way that we evolve, that's why we shouldn't compare with each other. We should learn with each other, exchange experiences, but not judge. That's in the gospel, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't judge so that you are not going to be judged for the same measure, with the
Yeah.
same measure, because we don't have enough knowledge even about ourselves, our own complexity, right?
Yeah.
But the thing, Marcia, is that the ego is not very knowledgeable, let's say, at, at least in the beginning of life. And the ego is always in this duality,
Yeah.
the other and I, body and mind,
Yeah.
and black and white, and beautiful and ugly. So we are dealing with this duality here in the material world, and also we are like caught in space and time, because
Yeah.
we have the past, our traumas, memories, good and bad, and we have the present that we are here talking, but we are also thinking about the future. Oh, how cool that a lot of people are going to be listening to our podcast. and we can exchange experience with people that come to us and ask questions and ask us to talk about this and that. So we are learning together. But that's the ego, and it's okay because the ego is this part. It's like, let's think about the psyche as Earth, for instance, in the
Okay.
ego as a moon, this
Yeah.
moon that is orbiting and that it's bringing us, just for to compare the size, as Jung thought.
Yeah.
So Jung thought the size very small in a sense of the ego, because it is for him like our small consciousness.
Yeah.
It's very important because it's doing the hard work here. Let's not think,
Yes.
oh, the ego is not anything so important, because
Yeah.
we have what Jung says, the higher self, that Joanna de Angelis says, Jung's self, capital S, is
Yeah.
our spirit. So can you imagine our spirit with all its knowledge? And thanks God that we forget a lot of stuff, because to have that knowledge that our self has, of course, we as bringing together the knowledge of spirit and psychology and spiritist psychology, we know that we reincarnate, that we are all learning through many lives, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's we can compare that our higher self, that Joanna says, that is our spirit. So Jung's self, concept of the self, has so much more knowledge than the ego. Okay, but the ego is doing the hard work here.
So let me
Because,
just recap
yeah,
because I
come,
want all of
go.
us to. This is really important. So from a spiritual or reincarnationist theory, right? We are all, not that we have, we are all immortal spirits, meaning it's incarnation after incarnation after incarnation, and the knowledge that the spirit acquires is much larger than the knowledge that one personality, one life lived contains. So for example, Marcia, um, I have my ego helps me develop this personality that fits my life today, but there's so much more, right? We can even maybe reference semiotics and the discipline, right, that talks about all the knowledge that from a psychological perspective we could talk about the collective unconscious. It's there, and we have our personal unconscious, we have collective unconscious, and we have this enormous knowledge that we tap. And the ego, like the moon, is this smaller aspect of what we understand about life. But you were saying very important to understand the ego works very hard, and it's a very important aspect of our lives, right?
Very important,
Yeah.
because Joanna says that to have this chance, to have this life,
Yeah.
to have this personality, because this
Yeah.
personality is doing a job, very important job for our spirit,
Yeah.
because it's a learning process and we are learning a lot here, right? And we need our egos, we need to mature, and we are talking about initiation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So Joanna says that the ego, it's like a prize of this personality, and it's like a prize that the self deserved, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so this life is very precious.
Yes.
And even if, of course, the ego is going to feel losses as suffering. So I wanted to give this context, Marcia, that you made such a great synthesis of this, what we are, all this context that we are talking about, so
Mm-hmm.
that people can understand the difference, and I think it's kind of they are complementary of Freud and Jung.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
because when we are talking about grief, of course, a loss that we know that we are all going through life losing, as you well said,
Yeah.
loved one, loved things, for instance, jobs, as you said,
Yeah.
and even material things. We can lose a house, for instance, right? And of course, we're not going to talk about the symbolism of the things, because right now, we are going to talk it probably in another podcast. But we can also lose, as you said, abstractions, for instance, freedom.
Yeah.
We can lose freedom. We
Yeah.
can lose what we feel as our land, our country, for instance,
Yeah.
our way of life.
Yeah.
So we are always in this moment, a very difficult moment that we all as humanity are going through, because we know through spiritist knowledge that we are in a shift of consciousness, and a shift of consciousness, like individuals or collectively. We don't go through a shift of consciousness to another level, to a higher consciousness, without crisis and
Yeah.
without losing something. But
Yeah.
who is going to feel that is losing something? The ego. So when you say, who is losing? Oh, it's the ego. Because I dare say, and Joanna can help me here, I dare say that for our higher self that knows what we are doing here, what's the purpose that made us reincarnate, we are not from his or its perspective,
Hmm.
it's not losing exactly, because we know through spiritist knowledge that we have planed with our mentors, guides,
Yes.
this incarnation and the main aspects of it,
Yeah.
right?
We are
So, of
co-authors of our life, our decisions, what we are here
yes,
to do, right?
yes, yes. So the main challenges, because of course we need to know more about ourselves as spirits, because we are evolving. So of course, Joanna calls atavisms. So
Yeah.
ancient aspects that we bring with us that are not quite well resolved within us, integrated, learned. It's all the same, we can say. So we come here to make it better, to learn better what we haven't learned yet as spirits. So of course that we are going to lose things, because that's the challenge. But who is going to lose? The ego.
Okay.
Okay, we can all think that the self is always gaining. It's
Ah,
the
I love
opposite,
that. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's doing what was supposed to do. Even if as Emmanuel, Chico Xavier mentor said,
Hmm.
that there were, I don't remember, maybe you remember
Hmm.
the percentage that he said, and that
Hmm.
was last century when Chico Xavier psychographed many of his books. But
Many, many books. Yeah.
many,
Yeah.
500, they are
Yeah.
then counting with people that are putting together more of his material. But the
Hmm.
thing is that I remember that Emmanuel gave some percentage of the souls that get in the end of this life, right? And haven't achieved everything that they planned when they reincarnate. He
Yeah.
gave percentage that I can't remember, but maybe
But it's
for the next
quite
podcast.
small. Yeah, but it's quite small.
Quite
Those that
small, I
have
remember
fulfilled.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if one fourth
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah. Yeah.
were the ones that could, or one fifth was the one that were the ones that in the end of life
Yeah.
would say, yes, I did it a
Yeah.
100%, everything that I was supposed to do. So even
But
as
think about it. Even in this life, right, with
yeah,
all of our dreams and all the desires and all that we plan in a very materialistic way of thinking, we do the same, right? If we think that we're in our deathbed and we say, Anahy, did you do all that you want to accomplish? And you go like, no, absolutely not. I am going through that myself, where at what I call the this beginning, the twilight of my years, my life, approaching the time to retire, and I look back, and says, no, too soon. There's so much more. And I'm talking again in a material perspective. Can you
mhm.
imagine at a spiritual dimension, right?
Yes, and you know what I've heard? I wasn't even think about that, so I think I'm supposed to talk about that because it's an intuition. I
Yeah,
heard this week, I was listening to someone talking about Chico Xavier
yeah,
writings
yeah.
and about life and death.
Hmm.
And he said that when we get to the spiritual realms, of course, he was talking about the, right after death, that
Hmm.
right after we adapt again to the spiritual dimension. And he was talking about spiritual colonies, things like that, that we
Yes.
join our mentors to, to say,
Mm-hmm.
well, let's see, as you were saying, Marcia, what have I done? Is that everything okay with the plan that I had? What have
Hmm.
I missed? And he said the amount, I think it's so beautiful, the amount of love and compassion that the
Yeah,
mentors have for us,
yeah,
never, never any judgment.
yeah.
And it's only us doing, this self-analysis, as Joanna calls
Yeah,
us to do
yeah.
in this life. So the amount of compassion and love, they are always there for us. So then the person was saying, talking about Chico's and Emmanuel's
Yeah,
writings,
yeah.
that because of all that,
Hmm.
when we see that we have not completed
Hmm.
what we planned with our mentors for this life,
Yeah.
then of course we need, oh, I will ask for another chance because I
Yes.
want to do it again. So, can you imagine the amount of love and the compassion, the understanding? It's unbelievable. So, of course, in this shift of consciousness, Joanna is asking us to have the same compassion, the
Hmm.
same love for ourselves, and to try to make this, that's the initiation,
Yeah,
to try to do this self-analysis, this inner journey to our hearts, to our true self,
yeah,
and to try to discern what we are doing, if we are doing okay, what else should I have been doing? For instance, if we are here, we are losing, but we are gaining. We have to
yeah,
remember that. So I just wanted to come back and to see Freud and to think
yeah.
with you guys. Freud was talking about the ego, okay?
Okay.
About the structure of our personality, and when he talked about loss and grief.
Yeah,
And the thing is that he made that seminal paper
yeah,
about mourning and melancholia.
yeah.
Uh, he drafted that paper. Marcia, can you imagine that in the First World War
Wow,
in 1915, and it
wow.
was published in 1917?
Yeah,
Okay, so he was going through, he was struggling with personal losses.
yeah,
in the First World
And
War.
if I may, I just
Yeah, go
imagine,
ahead.
and I know some, we're no longer going through the COVID-19 pandemic,
Yeah,
but if you think about it, it's almost the same sense of loss of people that in a war, World War One, happened during the pandemic, with so
yeah,
many of our friends, our family members, people that we knew, and I think I mentioned this before in another episode. Someone that I know, he lost 18 family members and our close friends.
wow.
18, right? And then his son-in-law passed not of COVID, but of a heart attack. And that just, he couldn't cope anymore. And there was a huge change in how he processed his life, his marriage, his religiosity. He put everything on hold because that amount of grief that he was going through was just too much for him to manage. So I think when you talk about Freud writing the paper on mourning and melancholia, right, at that time, and I didn't know that he was doing at that exactly time. You can see how that may have colored his reasoning and rational thoughts on this paper. Yeah,
Yes, of course, Marcia.
yeah,
So what happens is that, and I think it's great that, unfortunately, but we have to talk about also the COVID,
yeah,
because there is a difference, and Freud is the first to understand this difference between mourning and melancholia,
yeah,
because he says that mourning is a natural process,
yeah.
okay, of the ego,
And one
because
thing,
we,
right?
yeah, go ahead.
When I read about it, sorry to keep interrupting you. When I read about the what he brings, and I'd love to hear from you, but what is important for all of us to think about, mourning would be the processing grief, right? The what we have to go emotionally to through grief. But
Yeah.
melancholia is the word for depression, right?
For us, yes, the word, it's pathological,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
melancholia.
yeah,
And grief and mourning is not.
yeah,
It's, as we were saying, of course, the ego is going to experience a lot of losses throughout
yeah,
the life cycle.
yeah,
But the thing is that mourning is conscious and it's
yes,
natural and it's temporary,
yeah,
okay?
mhm, yeah,
It's a natural response to losing a loved one, or even, as we said, in abstraction, that we say
yeah,
a liberty, or things like that. So it is painful, of course. It is for the ego. Remember, it's
yeah,
our small consciousness, it's not our expanded consciousness. So for our egos, it's painful, very painful.
mhm,
And it's a process of detaching oneself from the, like, that emotional energy that goes in the direction of the loved one
yeah,
has to be detached because we lost the person.
mhm,
It's felt like a loss by the
yeah,
ego, right? But it has to be processed, okay, and it has to do with reality testing,
yeah,
because, as Freud said, because I have to understand that the person is not going to be available anymore, or the situation is going to be changed. So it has to be with the has to do with this discernment of the ego. So we
mhm,
call the reality testing, and it's slowly, we the process of slowly accepting, okay, the loss. And that's important because for Freud, since it's a natural and conscious process, the ego has throughout the life cycle to make new attachments.
yeah,
Okay, it has to be available for new attachments. So and we can see, for instance, we say that mourning, the natural process, Marcia, is like takes around 1 year,
Mm,
around 1 year,
mm,
more or less.
mm.
Okay, the natural process.
Yeah.
And because of course we have Elizabeth
Ross.
Ross
Yeah.
on Death and Dying, beautiful book, and
Yeah.
so many of her books that explain the process, the natural process that the ego goes through. Okay, and but that's totally natural, and little by little this energy becomes available. We all know that because we all have undergone a lot of process of loss. So little by little, after some time, the energy is available again for other attachments, right?
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
natural process. But as you said, melancholia,
Mm.
right, is a pathological, unconscious process. And that's very important because it is an excessive response to loss. Okay. But then you're going to ask me, oh, Anahy, but what's excessive, right?
Yes. Yes.
But it's excessive, for instance, from the point of view of time, when it takes much more than 1 year. You go to second year, it's okay, but then you go to the third, to the fourth, to the fifth, and you cannot. You undergo a process of, for instance, in melancholia, of self-reproach,
Yeah.
a drop of self-esteem, a lot of rage
Mm.
towards yourself, oneself, towards the lost,
Yeah.
the person that you lost, or the situation that you lost. So we have to pay a lot of attention, Marcia, because of course, in a very traumatic event like COVID,
Hmm.
like so many deaths in our families, for instance, or a job or situations, of course, it's going to take a little more time from, the natural process of grief, of mourning. But the thing is, because it was so unexpected, so painful for
Yeah.
many, many people around the world,
Yeah.
and without giving names, of course, because we are not judging, but we saw around the globe, even, medical personnel and responsible for different countries and health from different peoples, they themselves very disturbed, and even science was very difficult, because for science to develop needs time, to develop medicines and
Mm.
vaccines and things like that.
Yeah.
It was all done in a very extreme conditions, with a
Yeah.
lot of discussion, with a
Yeah.
lot of fear. So it was all very traumatic for all around the globe. But that's the bad part, let's say, and that depending on the, for instance, amount of death and losses that you had, and the structure and maturity of people's egos, of course.
Hmm.
But of course, we're not judging, because even
Hmm.
if you're very mature, depending on the amount of trauma,
Yeah.
right, you
Accumulated,
can.
right? Trauma can
Yeah.
compound the impact. Yeah.
Yes, and we have, and also depending of the coping process of each people,
Hmm.
and people that are around the world, and of each person, that varies a lot, and it's very complex discussion. But we know the spiritist knowledge, and I study religion and spirituality and mental health, and
Yeah.
we know the positive effect, the positive coping, that if a person develops his, her own spirituality, it
Yes.
makes a huge difference, because it's a very, very powerful coping mechanism, the spirituality of the person and its development. So, but this discussion it's
Yeah.
amazing, was not done enough in the
Yes.
COVID, I think.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, because we go on, we have to go on with our lives. So a
Mhm.
lot of things that are happening to us, all
Mhm.
this division and these difficulties to talk and to respect other people's opinions about anything, and to grow together and to understand that in a deeper levels
Mhm.
we are all one, because we are all share this beautiful, let's say, because Jung talks about the archetypes as the footsteps of God in our psyche.
Oh, beautiful.
I
Uh-huh.
think it's so beautiful. So we all share all these possibilities, all these archetypes in the depths of our psyche. And the main one is the God image, is the archetype of unity, of wholeness that we all have. So it is an experience that, for instance, loss that you talked about, the COVID, that we
Yeah.
all had in some more than others,
Yeah.
or much more painful. But it was a learning process.
Yeah.
And Marcia, as a psychiatrist and a Jungian analyst, the people that I think are healthier, that I encounter and that I can evaluate, that are healthier, are the people that have developed their spirituality.
Yeah.
Okay, and then and we are saying that all around the globe, it's going on like waves of spiritual awakening. So when we were in our our times, the spirit of our times,
Yeah.
where the most we felt the most fear as humanity, and
Yeah.
it didn't matter if you were rich or poor, if you're that and
Correct.
that, everyone was
Yeah.
okay, affected in some way. So when we were together, suffering together, losing together, was the moment for modernity, I think, for our days, where many people awaken for the spiritual truths. So I
And that
think
is an
it's,
incredible positive, unanticipated but positive aspect to that collective experience, right?
yes, exactly. So going back now, we talked a little bit about Freud, right?
What
About
about Jung
mourning.
now? Let's talk about
And
Jung.
now Jung, now Jung. So the goal of the mourning process, the grief for Freud, is forming new attachments, right?
Correct.
That's the
And
goal.
you mentioned energy, right? So the mental image that I had is perhaps a vessel, like let's say a transparent vase, and there is a spigot, right? So as we lose from an ego perspective, you're saying, right? You lose someone because we don't lose. This is that we have to internalize. We don't lose anyone,
Yes,
but
yes,
the apparent loss of someone depletes that energy, and let's say the water in the vase, and because the spigot is open and it trickles down for about a year, and but there's another vase that catches that same liquid,
yes.
the same water, and when this other one, one is empty but the other one is full, you are using the same fuel, the same energy, the same water to create new life connections, and
Wow,
there
I
is
like the image. I like the image, Marcia.
but it's quite beautiful if you think about it, right? The
Yeah.
it's circular, it doesn't go away, it's repurposed, if you will.
Exactly, exactly. So that's talking about the ego, who is doing the job as we were talking in the beginning.
Yeah.
But then we come to Jung's concept of the psyche and the
Yeah.
self, right?
Yeah.
So for Jung,
Mm-hmm.
The goal of the mourning process is to find a potential for new life
Ah,
and and deeper meaning that arises from the unconscious.
yeah,
Why the unconscious? Because in the unconscious, for Freud, like the he arrives only in the
yeah,
personal unconscious. So the for Freud, the unconscious, like, kind of pathological,
yeah,
because our repressed and denied impulses are there,
yeah,
the
yeah,
things that the ego cannot think, that it cannot deal with. It's all in the personal unconscious. But for Jung, let's remember that he went uh, deeper to the collective unconscious. So and of course, he arrives at the concept of the self, the higher
mm-hmm.
self.
Yeah,
So Jung viewed grief
yeah,
not, not as a pathology, for instance, but
yeah,
as an essential, as
yeah,
and transformative, and as I said, an archetypal process, and loss as initiation, and we are
yeah,
talking about as a sacred rite of passage, Marcia.
yeah,
Okay.
beautiful. Yeah,
And he said he advocated that we should embrace grief, not, like something being masochists or thing like that. No, but we
sure.
should embrace grief,
Mm,
believe in, because he believed that the confronting deep pain, and what a lot of people, I hear a lot of people talking about the dark night of the soul,
yes, yes,
right? That we all know that when we get to this state of deep pain that Jung brought from alchemy, the image of
yes,
mortification, would say
yeah,
that it's Latin, mortificatio, something that it's a symbolic death, right? That's the dark night of the soul. So when we embrace, we go through a transformative process. That's the process of that you were talking about, of initiation, of the rite of passage. And I think that's so important, because what's this rite of passage for? What
mm-hmm.
we are going to another level of consciousness. As we are saying, we're finding deeper meanings to our
Mm-hmm.
lives,
Yeah,
and we are going to this new potential in ourselves, right, where life creates, where we are co-creators of our lives and our reality, right?
yeah, yeah,
So the mortification is an alchemical metaphor, we would say, to
mm-hmm.
this painful psychological process. I
Yeah,
think that's important. It is painful. And it's when the ego, then we come to the ego collapses, Marshall, because
okay,
we know that the dark, a lot of mystics and even the saints that,
yeah,
for different religions, they go through this dark night of the soul. The
mm-hmm.
ego, in a certain way, has to collapse. We are not talking about psychosis and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
but through this painful process, the structure of the ego, for instance, for to find myself very proud of my material achievements,
Yeah,
for instance. And we can even use Jung as an example, because Jung comes to this all these conclusions that we are talking about
mm-hmm.
when he breaks up with Freud in the beginning of the 20th century. I
Yeah,
think it was around 19, also after World War One, like
yeah,
1914. He was
yeah,
in the war as a medical. He was young, and he was as a medical professional and more. And of course, he always go through all this process, but a lot of what we call anomalous experiences
Hmm.
or spiritual experiences happens to Jung is different from Freud. Freud was grieving because he was totally
Yeah.
connected with the ego.
Yeah.
But Jung already, we know through his story of his life, already had a lot of anomalous spiritual experiences. And he even saw the beginning of the war when that vision that he had with the blood covering Europe.
Yeah. So
Okay,
it's very
it's
interesting, right? So um, he embraced um, he embraced the idea of the collapse of the ego, right? And he was open to awareness. And as I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it is the best of his work, the most
yeah.
meaningful work that he left. His legacy came after this collapse, when he was no longer proudly carrying the gains, the successes as a psychiatrist, as a professor, as whatever the roles that he had until then, right? He had to just break it down
Yes,
into this
exactly.
moment of crisis, of loss, of collapse, and then get back up again with renewed energy, but a very authentic energy to look at uh, at life no longer through the lenses of the ego, but the lenses of the self.
Yes, and he writes the Red Book, for
Yeah,
instance,
yeah,
with all he's talking with his own soul,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
He
yeah,
came back to the soul, let's say. So it was an agonizing process for Jung and
yeah,
for all of us who go through the dark night of the soul,
yeah,
but it's fundamental for the what we call the individuation process, the
yeah,
process of being whole,
yeah,
of
yeah,
being the soul and developing the work of the soul that we were supposed to, like Emmanuel
yeah.
said.
Mhm.
Well, I can say that maybe not 100%, but a lot I have achieved
Yeah,
in this
yeah,
life. So I think, Marcia, just for us to, because I know we are on time.
yeah.
Um,
No, yeah,
yes, I
yeah,
know,
yeah,
but just for us to make it clear to everybody, I just wanted to remind that for Freud was very important. He was helping us
yeah,
um, um, help our own egos to be healthier, okay, to
yeah,
understand that
yeah,
we all go through this process, that natural, but also to recognize when it's getting pathological and to ask for help.
yeah,
Jung was calling us, calling our attention through his own experience to
yeah,
our spiritual development in this life, to
yeah,
find within our own psyche this inner voice, this higher self that
yeah,
knows the process that we are going through, and follow this voice, not the outside world, not the ambition and the material
yeah,
calling of the world, but our inner world. And Joanna and the Spiritist knowledge is helping us to find meaning and purpose in this life and to understand how precious and important this life is for the development of our higher consciousness, our spirit, to go towards towards what Joanna calls cosmic consciousness. But that's is the I will leave everybody very curious to our next podcast with Sarah, right? To go
very
further
good.
in this discussion.
Very good. That's awesome. So I'm just going to maybe give a repeat so that we because there's so much good content here. So we're talking about grief of the ego, right? But we need to know what is this ego loss that we talked about? Just for context, right? And it's very important that we don't read it as, oh, pride and arrogance, but it's the identity structure, right? Who we think we are, what we believe our life is, or the roles that we've had: mother, daughter, student, achiever, whatever, right? So, whatever the loss may be, it destabilizes that narrative that the ego so carefully constructed for ourselves. That's how we introduce ourselves to ourselves into the world. So the grief is now not about losing someone, but it's about losing ourself, our self definition, right? So you mentioned a little bit about Sigmund Freud, and he talks about mourning in melancholia, and I think it's important for us to say thank you, Freud, for
Yeah.
bringing this study, right, about why does this hurt so deeply, right? And it's all about that energy that we talked about, in investing energy in our identity, into our relationships, into our roles. And when those, the other, disappear, it's like it's a waste. I've been doing this for nothing. So it is all about, and he talked about it, right? I no longer recognize myself because I don't have that relationship. Whereas, and I'm just finalizing here, Carl Gustav Jung, he talks about ego loss no longer as a collapse, right? Like Freud said, but as this beautiful invitation. So, the invitation, I would say, even though we didn't talk about it, but it's about integration, right? Which is really confronting our shadow that start to emerge through fears. And when we talk about COVID or war, in that moment where collectively speaking, we as a human race just felt so much fear, insecurity, etc., etc. But the shadow emerges, and now the higher self, right? The self somehow has a room to reorganize all those definitions. So it is really the point where grief here, per Gustav Jung, opens it's the threshold and the door that is open toward our transformation. Did I summarize correctly? Because it's such a beautiful concept or series of concepts, that I think is very important for us to really put into those theoretical framework so that we can go through it less painfully.
I think so. Yes, I think it's very good. You
Mm,
summarize very well. Only that, Marcia, I just wanted to remember everyone that, of
yeah,
course, we are going when it's painful and it can be agonizing for both
yeah,
Freud and Jung. You know
yeah,
the
yeah,
and
yeah,
the way that egos, our egos are going to be feeling the loss and pain.
yeah.
But I think even for our egos, Marcia, that's what I wanted to remind everyone that Joanna is bringing. She went further even
Yes.
than Jung.
It's almost like
She's,
this relay race, right? So the first one
yes,
was Freud, and he passes the baton to Jung, and Jung passes the baton to
to
Joanna.
Joanna, yes, of
Yeah.
course, because she's saying yes, but we have the understanding of reincarnation
Yes.
and how our psyche has all in the depths of the psyche, the higher self has all this knowledge.
Yeah.
So as you said, we never lose. We think we are losing, we
Yeah.
feel losing, that we are
Yeah.
losing things, we
Yeah.
feel the pain, but it's a very, very powerful coping mechanism better than any antidepressant, I can
Yes,
tell you.
yes,
When we integrate, really integrate, it's a process, it takes time. Sometimes you are going to have to take some medicine, for instance,
yeah,
if people go through a more pathological melancholia and things like that, you have to see a psychiatrist, a psychologist. It's okay, it's part of the process. But when we really integrate spiritist knowledge that Joanna is bringing, spiritist psychology, when we integrate, and the ego is mature enough not only to talk about, to read, but to feel in our hearts, not only in our minds, that
mm,
we are never alone,
yeah,
and that we have this knowledge deep inside of us. And I can tell you through research, one
yeah,
last data, that in Brazil, some research show that 50% of the population, we're talking not about clinical thing, no, non-clinical, the general population, 50% has already felt the presence
mm,
of a loved one that died.
yeah,
Okay, and in the United States, some research show, especially this data is from 2023, after the COVID. That's
yeah,
what I'm talking about, this spiritual awakening.
yeah.
That 53% of the people, when asked, have already felt that a loved one has already died, has visited the person.
Oh, that's beautiful.
50% and
Yeah,
34% have already felt the presence,
uh-huh.
because visit can be through dreams or visions.
Yes, yeah,
Feeling the present, when you feel, even some people even feel hugged, or
oh,
even feel the kiss, of
yeah,
father,
yeah,
mother, grandfather. So the veil is getting thinner. That's a great thing
yeah,
for us to discuss with
yeah.
Jasada in the next podcast.
I love it. I really appreciate that. Oh, my goodness. But the time somehow is evading us. It is time to say goodbye. And I just want to say, for everyone, thank you for being here. Thank you, Anahy. I really appreciate how we zoomed in grieving of the ego as it collapses, right? And how understanding Freud, Jung, and Joanna, we are better equipped to go through it, this universal experience. I want to also thank our sponsors today before we say goodbye. Thanks to Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, and AMI Brazil. Thank you. Thank you so much and so long.
Bye bye.